can excuse my crappy behavior.
Um,
Yeah, but you actually don't have to be mindful with landlords. There's a caveat in the ancient Buddhist writings. Everyone but landlords deserves compassion and kindness.
I love it.
Just kidding. Welcome, everyone, to Wellness Coach. Hello to everyone watching us on YouTube. And I am joined today by Suzanne, Jewell, and we are going to talk about creativity in business and how to tap into it with mindful and meditative practices. Hello, Suzanne. How are you?
Hey, Stefan, how are you today? This is going to be a great session of just jamming together around creativity, creating. That's the root of creativity. It's how do we create?
Absolutely. And as we were discussing before we went live here, it's not what you think it is necessarily, or isn't limited to what you think it is. And I'm really excited to explore that terrain, tap into Suzanne, our expert coach's endless knowledge on this. But before we begin, I will just remind you that this is an interactive session that we so want you to take advantage of by using the chat box, using the Q&A box, or putting up your hand so we can enable your mic and talk directly to you. And this is not available on YouTube, just so you know. Download the app from the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store so you can talk to us. YouTube's just a one-way communication street, though we're so glad to see you there. Okay, Suzanne, before we begin today, did you want to start by settling us into a practice?
Let us indeed do that. So the first thing we're going to do, if any of you have practiced with me before, is you'll always hear me say, take a seat of dignity, because in how we meet this moment and how we take our seat is how we actually will ride the wave of whatever's going on. So please be very mindful of putting your feet both firmly on the floor. Obviously, don't do this if you're in a car and driving. And if you are in a safe space, like at your desk, to do so, take your fingers off the keyboard. Let your hands rest gently on your lap. And in this moment of having a strong back and a soft front, allow your chest cage to rise a little and your shoulders to drop slightly so that you can offer your lungs up for a great amount of oxygen as you focus for these next 8 or 9 or 10 minutes that we'll be practicing together mindfully. I'm going to invite you first to become aware of your body seated on this chair or this couch or the floor, wherever you might be. Try to collect and gather your attention. Think of your attention like a flashlight. Let that flashlight shine its radiance on you seated in this spot on earth, in this moment, on this day, at this time. Try to bring some attention and awareness to the quality of your breath. Have you paid attention at all today to how you're breathing? And whatever you notice, just let it be. Don't change it. Maybe it's a little bit of rushed breathing because you wanted to make class today. Let that be what it is. Note if it's high up in the chest or in the throat. Maybe you seated yourself with a moment or two of time and preparation, and your breathing is nicely gentle in the belly. Simply connect with your breath for just a moment, paying present time awareness. This is how I'm breathing in this moment. As you settle, I'm going to invite you to, in your mind's eye, or what is also called the eye of the heart. In Pali, the word heart and mind are considered to be the same, heart-mind. Bring into the awareness between your heart and your mind a particularly magical spot that you go to in your life. This spot might be only in your mind, or it might actually exist. It might be a riverside park where you walk when your mind is full and you go there to think. It might be a quiet space inside of a pine forest, a spot where you are able to look through the tree trunks and you can hear the rustle of the needles above your head. And you simply walk in that space silently. Maybe it's a corner in a room where you happen to have a dedicated spot to practice. Maybe it's the fountain in your garden. Simply call to mind what I call your mindful magic spot. And as you bring into awareness all of the sensory perceptions of being there, if it is next to a stream, you can hear the gentle trickle of the water going over the top of the rocks. You can hear a little bit of the blue jays or the cardinals or the sparrows moving through the tree canopy. Allow your body to feel the sensations of returning to this space for you to clear out some space in your mind. Become aware of how you bring a mind that may be full of baggage. And in this place, whether it's physical or inside of you and virtual, you always can feel like you breathe better here. Like you can unpack your knapsack. And if that knapsack or that backpack feels particularly heavy, imagine in this space a way that you take that knapsack of worry or jumbled thinking off your back and gently open that knapsack and lay the things that are carrying with you and burden gently out on the ground. Simply bring them into the light. I'm worried about my residence, or I'm worried about my sweetheart. Simply lay them out on the ground, name them, and let them have some space. Let them be present and near you in this magic spot of mindfulness. But take them out of the dark, rustly spot that they rumbled around in inside your backpack. Wherever you are, and wherever these things are that seem to be jumbling your mind or your attention or your focus, now I'm going to invite you to walk away from them. Turn your back on all the contents. You have now taken the backpack off. You've now left the contents on the ground in the light with air and breeze moving around them. Walk free. Be unburdened. Feel what it feels like to no longer carry this backpack on your back. Your arms are free. Your chest is held a little higher. Maybe even take the pose of lifting your arms up to the air and to the sky, and then drop them down gently, allowing yourself to feel the freedom of no longer being burdened, of being in a space of open creativity. We'll sit here for just a few seconds to allow ourselves to be free. And as a way to gently move back into the world of time and space and light and the chair we sit on, take your arms as you inhale nicely through the nose, lift them up to the air, letting them go with a nice exhale. Breathing in again with an inhale, releasing with a nice sigh. And a third and final time with an inhale through the nose. Fluttering your eyes open. Coming back into the room. Welcome from your mindful magic spot and putting down your backpack to having opened yourself up to mindful creativity.
Thank you so much for that, Suzanne, and welcome to those of you just joining us. Hello, Ryan, Trey, Salmon, and Julie. Good to see you guys again. Hello, Nat and Roy. Good to see you guys. And if you weren't there for this whole meditation, I suggest checking out the replay and going through it again. I found that wonderful meditation. I've never done a visualization practice like this one. I don't normally even do well with them, actually. But this was such a cool, more like mentally tactile experience of the mindful process, of laying something out, being aware of it, understanding it, letting it go, and doing it really methodically. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate you posturing me properly, because every time we get into a meditation, I have to adjust my camera and microphone because I realize how much I'm slouching.
I love it. Stefan, thank you for your literally juicy reflections. I so appreciate that you literally are offering this opportunity for us to literally have this chance to set down what it is that we carry in our backpack and leave that knapsack behind. And that doing, that naming, allows us to open up space for creativity. And that's really what we were going to talk about today, was how do we create a relaxed space that's still focused, that can really feed the opportunity. At the root of the word creativity is the word create. So that mindful magic spot gives us a chance to actually do exactly that.
Definitely, I agree. And guys, let us know how that practice was for you and how you're feeling now. Leave that in the chat box and the Q&A box. Any questions or comments you have about that practice, if anything of significance came up for you. So, creativity, in the context of entrepreneurship, or just being in, a key role in your business where, you are depended on to make creative decisions to help entrepreneurial guidance of the company. What is creativity's role in business or organization? A lot of us just think about it as something maybe artistic or pretty or aesthetic, but how do you define it?
So I really think it's so interesting that one of the most recent Harvard studies that came out actually says that you now are looking, if you are shifting or rising on the corporate ladder, that one of the number one assets you can have is creativity. So as a job skill, this is being asked for. When you look at what does it mean to possess or engage in creativity or think creatively, it really means to produce something new and useful. And I always tend to go toward kind of the brainiac side of things. And I'll comment on what it is that Einstein said. And this is where I think it applies so much to business, especially the world that we're in, where fixed structures are being disrupted and we're looking to take novel, innovative viewpoints about what we've used or done in normal ways. But Einstein says that you cannot solve a problem from the mindset with which it was first created. So what does that mean? It means that you have to shift the way you're looking at it. And that in and of itself becomes an act of novelty. It becomes an act of, underneath the word novel, it means having new thought. And part of where mindfulness has really played an important role in this is there is a Harvard study that has looked at mindfulness and creativity. And one of the first things that it did was actually take 3 focus groups together. One group was given a 10-minute guided practice, kind of like we just did. Another group was encouraged to free think, let their mind wander, just be somewhere in their seat for 10 minutes, but let the mind wander. The third group was asked to immediately brainstorm. Interestingly enough, the ideas that came out of the first group that were given a practice to clear the mind, kind of like we did, take the backpack off, name what's bothering you, and then walk away from it in that space. The group that did a guided mindfulness practice not only came up with a larger percentage of ideas, they actually came up with ideas that were not already being enacted in the business space. So compared to what were the control studies, which were just doing some free thinking, and the other was actually going straight to brainstorming, it was proven that mindfulness allows what's called freestyle or divergent thinking. And that capacity of offering a pocket to pause of that 10 minutes helped offer some opportunity for that creativity to start getting fueled.
Yeah, and it sounds like something you can't force, like sitting down and brainstorming, there's this sort of like burden of obligation to get something impactful down on the paper. But it's really when you just kind of let it go and say, well, let's see what happens. That is when the real magic can happen. But also like when you have like goals and when you have like, maybe timelines and you really want to actually get results, how do you well, it's called try not to try, right? How do you get in that state of not trying that creates results because you can't actually will them into being, so
Well,
to speak?
and that's such an interesting space where learning to use your practice as a tool, like, okay, I've got this tool. If you practice it often enough, you literally are building both memory muscle, like how we sat, take a dignified seat. You're helping everything in your body get ready to go, oh, I'm going to pause. Oh, wow, I'm going to be able to let some things settle here. My monkey mind is going to get a chance to just rest. The other thing that I think is really interesting is in the world that we have of black and white and right and wrong and day and night, and this does come from the Buddhist realm, that there is the idea, and Rumi's the one who said it best, that out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. And this goes back to the idea that we often are in categorized thinking of this or that. When we allow something like a practice to hold us and we allow to arise whatever we're experiencing, we're actually expanding our awareness to the extent of, oh, I'm feeling a little agitated right now, but I'm okay with it. Interesting. Or, gosh, I'm feeling really peaceful right now to the point where I'm almost sleepy. Also interesting. Instead of necessarily having to craft judgment around that. So, the issue of what you just said of willing or not willing creativity is that if you create pockets to pause on a pretty regular basis, your mind and your muscles will start to get used to going, oh, that's right. Suzanne every morning at about 5 or 5:15 does what is called RPM. She rises, she pees, and she meditates. And right there, I've got a chance that if I'm her mind, to be able to realize I'm going to have a container where I can go and I can express. I've come to, no exaggeration, be able to sit on my meditation cushion next to my whiteboard with my fluorescent markers, and I can actually drop into a creative process working on a project for a client, whether it's writing copy or coming up with a marketing idea, where I literally can allow myself to be present enough to creativity. Not always does it come through, but often it does. And it might be a new name for the product, it might be a campaign idea. I just literally let myself be present to the creative force that does live there. It's always present. It's just whether or not we can tune down the noise enough to be able to hear that lowly nudge of creativity.
Yeah, and actually, we were talking about David Lynch before this discussion, and he's been meditating for about I don't know, probably 40 or 50 years, and super creative, just like legendary creative force in film. Says to actually create results, he sits down and he desires ideas, and I really like that statement. He's not
Yes.
like demanding results; he's just desiring ideas and having, I guess, like filled the tank
Yep.
with meditating frequently, that desire is more likely, that non-attached desire, so to speak, is more likely to trigger some valuable creative thinking there, maybe.
I think it's so important you talk about that, Stefan, because freestyle thinking also invites us not to be judgmental. We're so often, oh no, that won't work. Well, what if you just got to the point where you let some things come through? Oh, there's that. That's a possibility. Oh, there's that. That's a possibility. Oh, there's that. When you learn how to let that come through, you get a lot more opportunity for there to be a smorgasbord or a garden. And today you might not want to choose the cucumber, but there's also corn in that garden, but you've cultivated enough that there can be a lot of options for fruit. Instead of trying to prune right off the bat, you just let some of those come through and you become the vessel of capturing the ideas. One of the last times we spoke, we also talked about Elizabeth Gilbert's really interesting concept that she believes floating in what's called the new oosphere, the noosphere, around the earth, are all sorts of creative ideas. And depending on who's sitting with their heart and their mind open enough, the ideas will drop in. And if your mind is not open and the door is shut, then that idea will just leave and it will find somewhere else to be able to have a download and find its expression through someone else.
Yeah, definitely. And oh, by the way, guys, definitely jump into this discussion with whatever's popping into your mind, in your open, non-attached state. Doesn't matter how silly. Ask any question you like. Uh, and I'd like to ask you a question. When do you feel more creative? Let us know in the Q&A box or chat box any reflections you have on that or questions you have for Suzanne. This is interesting. You mentioned Albert Einstein, as a physicist.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about these like highly technical, highly, in a sense, practical fields like physics and mathematics, where most of the breakthroughs are made by people in their 20s, early 20s. Often, it's very rare to actually to see someone make a breakthrough in mathematics in their 30s. I've heard, which blew me away. But I guess there's this period of openness, this openness and this creative thinking where your general your patterns, your conditioning don't kind of lock you into certain paths. I guess there's more neurons, there's more expansion, there's more possibilities. So I'm curious about your reflection on this, on how to tap kind of back into that thinking. Does regular meditation kind of bring us into this more kind of youthful state where we're able to continue, we're able to kind of see the possibilities and not get in our own way? And also, though, how do you also maintain the wisdom of discrimination to say, this is actually a good idea out of all the crazy, weird ones I've had?
I love this conversation because it is literally like a force. We've heard artists talk about the muse. I happen to write a lot. And I would share with you that not specific to age, but specific to the hours of the day, I tend to have these really interesting, and it's considered to be the creative hour. About 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, if I'm working on a particular project that has to do or is calling a lot of writing to come through me, I will end up having full paragraphs that will show up in the front of my head. And I've literally come to recognize that if I don't either get up and grab a pen and write them down, or actually open up my phone and throw those notes onto my phone, I'll wake up with a headache. So I literally have come to recognize that the creative force for me happens on the clock, and it happens around what is often called the witching hour, 2, 3:30, or 4 in the morning. I think the topic of mindfulness practice as a regular attention practice is something that you will often hear, whether or not you look at someone like Gandhi, who was trying to rid India of the British colonial imperial behavior. He always took one day to remove himself from whatever was going on. I think the most important piece about this is, in order for there to be something new to come in, to change that mindset, you have to actually make space for it. And if you don't make space for it, whether you're young or older, the real issue is you will have what is called a fixed mindset, going back to the Carol Dweck information, or a growth mindset. And depending on how flexible you are, you won't have the opportunity to let those new ideas come in because you'll automatically be judging them. And when you can become much more open about, let me collect what's coming through, let me first collect and capture it like a rain bucket, then let me look in the bucket and go, oh, what's in the bucket? So you're removing that topic when you're paying attention on purpose in the moment, non-judgmentally and with curiosity, and you're engaging with curiosity, and you're leaving your judgment aside, and you're letting the rain come into the bucket that might be the ideas, and then you're going in there and going, oh, let me see what's here. Look at that, what's in there?
Yeah, totally. Different phases. There's the non-judgment phase, but then ultimately there is the discrimination phase, but like you don't intermingle them. You allow yourself that period first. That's great. And very salient to the discussion on creating space. Great comment from Nat here. I feel most creative when I'm on vacation, usually 3+ days into the vacation, because it takes that long to decompress for me. And if I'm near water, I suddenly have freestyle thinking with no self-judgment stopping me like they usually do every minute of the day.
That's an awesome observation, Nat. It's actually really common for people who tend to be really in touch with both their own self-awareness and also connected to nature, that when you get near water, there is even a talk that even taking a good shower with a salt scrub can help create some of that in you. So now that you know that, here would be my recommendation. Make sure that even if you're not on vacation, get near water as often as you can.
Absolutely. Another kind of water gives him or her a creativity. Nat could be male, I think. When I'm with close friends for a long period of time, a long dinner, a long night out, a long night of drinking, LOL, a long phone conversation. Whenever I feel like I'm in a safe space, I can let creativity and ideas flow. And I think that's interesting how alcohol is sometimes a catalyst for people. And it kind of was for me, but that changed. How do you feel about things like that?
You know, I probably, like anybody who's been on the planet a few decades, did that dance, and it's no longer a part of my experience now. And that's not because I'm against it or anything. I just have now spent so much time really learning the nature of my mind that when that nature or that state gets altered, it doesn't particularly feel as pleasant as it used to. And I also would share that there is a tendency, and especially in the West, that we are encouraged. There's an actual drinking culture that the way people engage is over drinks because we all have a lot of social anxiety. We have a hard time necessarily showing up and just being who we are. So I do think it's an interesting thing to see how are you able to be present without something that might alter how you're showing up.
Yeah, and we're a bit past 20 minutes now, and I'll just share my own story and then pass things over to you to close things off. But definitely shoot in any last questions you guys might have before we send you off into the world. But my experience with drinking, I used a couple of drinks, too many, and I'm just broken and dull. But like back when I was in my 20s, yeah, a couple of drinks because it would like just depress the right amount of brain function that was getting in my way, right? But then meditation came along and I felt the need to not drink at all. And just being awake and fresh was actually the best drug for me. And LSD too. Everyone thinks LSD. Ooh, I'm so creative when I do LSD. Heavily depresses brain function. And as it turns out, they thought it woke up brain function, heavily depresses it because, and you have this experience that feels so creative and exploratory because the brain that gets in the way is so depressed. But I would challenge people to feel if they need that to be creative, some kind of substance, to try meditating and see how their absolute default state can tap into that.
Yeah. Awesome. So if we're going to go to our home base, which is kind of the mindful magic spot we created a little bit earlier, we'll do a short little drop in. So take a spot on your chair in that dignified way so that the way that you meet this moment, the way that you take your seat, is the way that you arrive in your body. And just remember, whatever was the mindful magic spot that you created, that place of freedom. Remember how it felt. Remember the felt sense in the body. Maybe the breeze on your face in that space. Just touch it. Taste it. Allow it to wash over your being. And know that anytime you want to unpack your knapsack, you have the ability to go to this mindful magic spot. Walk away from what is troubling you and be in the freshness of this moment. Simple gesture like breathing in through the nose and raising your arms above your head to get some oxygen into the top part of your body. Exhaling through the mouth with a sigh. Coming back into this moment is literally all it takes. Maybe 65, 70 seconds. I want to invite you to live, work, create, and play in this day in a mindful way.